Now, today I'm thankful that you're here as we kick off this new series because I get to speak to a very fun and an exciting experience that a number of us have had in life, and I get to speak about burnout. Now, isn't burnout fun? Some of you look confused. I'm totally kidding. There is nothing, absolutely nothing fun about burnout. And in case any of you are curious or you're not so that familiar with burnout, I want to show you what are, at least according to experts, the 10 primary symptoms of burnout. Check these out with me on the screen. There's nothing fun, in my view, of being exhausted throughout the day, emotionally and physically. That's one of the symptoms. Falling frequently sick, that's no good. Low mood, absolutely not. Weight loss or weight gain. Now, I want to pause here for a second because some of you are thinking, well, maybe I'm burned out, okay, because you just stood on the scale. Okay, now hold on. I'm not saying you're not. I'm not saying you are, but I just want to remind you, we just went through Thanksgiving and Christmas. You possibly took in a little too much stuffing and pie. So maybe a treadmill is what you need, okay? I'm not, just a little food for thought. Hypertension, no good. Low self-esteem, absolutely no fun. Absenteeism from your commitments, work, school. Anxiety, low commitment to work, and reduced performance and productivity. So hopefully we're all on the same page that you know that burnout is not fun. There's nothing exciting about burnout. You know, I stand before you today as a man that as I look back over my life and my history, I can see a number of seasons in my life where I would say that I can identify with many of those symptoms, that I was an individual that was stuck in a place of burnout. And during those times of my life, as I reflect back on those, the one goal, the primary desire I have in those times was to break free or to get unstuck from burnout, to what I would call get my life back. That's really what I wanted. But what I found is as I went through burnout, that a lot of the advice and the counsel that's being provided today, it was easier said than done, if you will, to get out of burnout. That there were many times I would apply and try these different methods and approaches, but at the end of it, what I found is that I was just stuck, and the only thing I knew to do was to keep my head down, pray about it, and keep taking steps with the hope that one day I would step out of burnout and get my life back, to enjoy God, enjoy my family, enjoy my health, and all the blessings in my life. And I share that with you today with the belief that there are a lot of you that come into this place that are in different places as it pertains to burnout. Some of you, like me, can look back on seasons of your life, and you can say, yeah, I've been there, done that, and I have the t-shirt to prove it, right? You know what it's like to live with an unhealthy level of anxiety or low mood or possibly just being exhausted physically and emotionally. There are possibly some of you that come in this room today and you would say, that's not who I was, that's not where I was, that's where I am right now. That there are some of you here today, you are stuck in what you believe would be burnout. And you're looking for help. You're looking for hope. It's no fun, and you hope to get some help today. And there may be others of you here today that you feel like you're on the brink of burnout, that there's some symptoms. That they may be mild in nature, but you feel that you're maybe walking a tightrope, and with just a good old gust of wind, you may tip over into burnout, and you want to avoid that. And the reason why I know that's where so many of us are today is because researchers and experts are saying that as they look at us as a country, we are now known as a country with the culture of burnout. A culture of burnout. That this is something that is prevalent amongst us as Americans. What they're finding is as they research this, that more and more people are raising their hands saying, I'm burned out. They're also finding, and this is not good, that increasingly people are saying they are cycling in and out of burnout. Meaning that they will experience burnout, get a little better, cycle back into it, cycle back out of it, and even other people that seem to live in a perpetual state of burnout. And so guys, we have a problem. We have a major problem as it pertains to burnout. And this is why you're finding articles being published daily, tons of podcasts, numbers of books, where experts are trying their best to help as many people break free from burnout. Well, this morning, as we begin this series of talking about the pace to win the race and living a life free from burnout, what I believe God wants for me to offer you is a truth that He has been teaching me at a far deeper level than what I have lived it or experienced it ever in my life. And what he's been teaching me is that for myself, I have found that I have a tendency at times in life, to cycle in and out of burnout in different seasons. And what he's shown me is that oftentimes the advice and the counsel that's offered is at a symptomatic level. It's not addressing the root cause. And that to really live a life free from burnout, you have to get down to the root level and understand what's going on down here before you start trying to treat the symptoms. And so today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at a teaching that is actually over 3,000 years old, which is interesting. Here we are having to go back to 3,000 years ago to really better understand the truth about burnout. And this teaching was written down by someone all of you have probably heard of. His name was King Solomon. King Solomon. And I have a painting of King Solomon I'll show you from the 1800s. I don't know if this is what Solomon looked like. I just thought it was a pretty cool painting. But I'll tell you a little bit about King Solomon. King Solomon was the third king of Israel. There was King Saul, King David, who was Solomon's father, and then King Solomon followed his papa, David, as the king of Israel. And he served as king in the 900s BC for about 40 years. And there were three primary things that King Solomon was known for. One was his intellect. King Solomon was a very, very bright fella. He was referred to as the wisest man to ever live. Not only was he known for his intellect, he was known for his power because he was the king of Israel. He had a big sword to wield. He had a lot of power. And then lastly, he was extremely wealthy. He was so wealthy that as historians go back and look at his net worth and they bring it into today's times, they calculate he was worth somewhere around $2 to $3 trillion. That's a little bit of cheddar, isn't it? To put that in perspective, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world today, was just announced as having a net worth somewhere between 600 to 700 billion. And so what you would have to do to try to get to 2 trillion is take Elon Musk and combine the next 5 richest men in the world, which includes Jeff Bezos and Zuckerberg and others, and that would push you right up to 2 trillion, but you're still not where Solomon was. Now, why do I tell you that? The reason why I tell you that is because on paper, King Solomon you would believe would be unstoppable. This man had superior intellect. He had a lot of money, possessions, and power. You would think he would be the happiest man on the planet, that he would be able to do whatever he wanted to do and be fulfilled. But what we find is that King Solomon expressed that he really struggled with burnout. And he wrote about it in a piece of wisdom literature that we know today as Ecclesiastes. And this is the document that we have that's in the Old Testament. Now, I'm just going to tell you, if you want to try to follow along today, I'm going to try to help you do that, but I'm going to bounce around and I'm going to give a sketch just for time's sake. But I am going to look a little at Ecclesiastes. So if you want to turn over, we're going to start at the very beginning of Ecclesiastes, where Solomon begins to talk about burnout. And he reveals a very, very important truth about it. And so we'll take it from the top. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, beginning in verse 1, he begins with this. He said, "The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem, absolute futility," says the teacher. Absolute futility. Everything is futile. What does a person gain for all his efforts that he labors at under the sun? Aren't you encouraged? So here's King Solomon. And what we believe is that King Solomon, at this point, when he sat down and put pen to parchment, he was in his late 70s. He lived to his early 80s. The belief is he was probably in his late 70s. So he takes a seat and he begins to write. And the first thing he does is he introduces himself as the king of Jerusalem, son of David. That's how we know it was King Solomon. And he identified as a teacher. So what he's saying to his readers then, and for all of us today, is I have something I want to teach you about life. As an old man looking back on life, I want to teach you something. And the point he communicates first is that everything is futile. Everything is basically pointless, meaningless. And then what he states, and this is interesting, he asks the question, what do you gain from the effort that you put into this life, as he refers to it, under the sun, in this world? What Solomon was saying is that as he looked back on his life as an older man, he is thinking through, reflecting on all the effort and energy he poured into this life under the sun, and what he concluded was that he actually at the end gained nothing. And so he said, it's just futile. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, this does not sound like the words of an older man that's filled with hope and optimism in life. This is not a guy that sees rainbows and unicorns everywhere he looks, does it? He sounds like a cynical, burned out old man. But he goes on, and it's interesting, from this point through chapter 2, he begins to break down the way the energy he poured into this life that he was saying left him with nothing gained in life. And he covers a number of topics. And we're not going to look at this, but I'll sketch them out for you. He begins by talking about how he applied energy and effort to build his intellect by acquiring wisdom and knowledge, and just as trying to learn as much as he possibly could about how this world works and how life rolls. He also said he dabbled in folly and understanding the mind of a foolish person, which is pretty interesting. So this guy, he was a pretty cerebral individual. He also adds to that he pursued pleasure. Now, I think it's fitting to say he was one of those that lived by the motto, go big or go home, okay? And I'll tell you why. This man said he did not hold back on anything he thought that would bring him pleasure, which meant, ladies, he had a lot of wives and concubines, okay? So he was going after sexual pleasure, as well as foods. He took in all the foods. So this man, he didn't hold back on anything that he thought would bring him pleasure. He goes on to say that he even he collected as much silver and gold and possessions as he possibly could. As we know, 2 to 3 trillion, that's quite a bit. And then he concluded by stating that he pursued achievements that were superior to anyone that had ever come before him. And so after he listed off all these ways that he poured effort and energy into this life, in chapter 2, verse 11, he writes this summary of the way he saw it. When I considered all that I had accomplished and what I had labored to achieve, I found everything to be futile and a pursuit of the wind. There was nothing to be gained under the sun. I love this because what Solomon does is he now adds a way of thinking or seeing the way he saw his life. He brings the wind into it. And he talks about pursuing the wind. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever tried to chase the wind before. If you have, I'd love to hear about your experience, so find me after church and share that with me. But hopefully you haven't. But I think we would all agree that pursuing the wind would be an absolute colossal waste of time, wouldn't it? Because it doesn't matter how much time and energy and training you committed to chasing after the wind. At the end of it, you will always come up empty-handed. You can chase it and chase it and chase it and chase it, and you're going to come up empty-handed. What Solomon is saying is that he is looking back again on all these ways that he tried to pour effort and energy into all these things in life that included everything from his intellect to pleasure to wealth and possessions, as well as even achievements. And he said at the end of it, he feels like it all just slipped through his fingers. This is the way he looked at it, that he gained nothing under the sun. Something that I saw years ago, back in 2019, I think will help you maybe better understand the point he's making. But it was right after the Super Bowl. And I watched the Super Bowl mainly for the commercials. I don't know about you, but some of them are pretty funny. But back in 2019, the Rams played the New England Patriots. And of course, with Tom Brady, I mean, he is the GOAT, okay? He really is. They won another Super Bowl, the Patriots. And after the game, these reporters were meeting with some of the players and coaches from both teams, and they sat down, and one of the players that was interviewed was a player for the Rams, and his name is Andrew Whitworth. And so they asked Andrew, they said, hey, how does it feel, or how do you feel now that you're on the other side of the biggest game of your life, and you guys came out as losers? And his response to me, I thought it was funny then, I still think it's funny today, but this is what he said. Look at what he said with me. I don't give a crap if you have Hall of Fame bust, if you're a Pro Bowler, or win 20 Super Bowls. At the end of the day, you're all gonna die. Isn't that great? Now, I don't know if Mr. Whitworth had been reading Ecclesiastes, okay? I don't know. But I will tell you, what he said aligns with what King Solomon was writing. Here's what he was saying in so many words. Bro, listen, I'm not going to get depressed and sad and walk around that we lost and just be so upset by this, because at the end of the day, all these personal trophies, all these team awards and trophies, all these Super Bowls, at the end of the day, when you die, they slip from your hands. They slip through your fingers. And that's the point Solomon was making. King Solomon was making the point that at death, which he was fastly approaching, he knew this as an older man, everything that he had poured effort and energy into, and all those things were going to slip through his fingers. And so he said, you gain nothing. It is futile. It is meaningless. Vanity is vanity, is another way that he put it. From this point in chapter 2 through chapter 12, King Solomon writes a lot of what you could call axioms and a lot of insights and truths about how the world works and the cycles and all those sorts of things. And there's some interesting things in there. But then he gets to the very end of his teaching and he closes it with a powerful statement in chapter 12, verse 13. And this is what he writes. When all has been heard, the conclusion of the matter is this: fear God and keep his commands, because this is for all humanity. For God will bring every act to judgment, including every hidden thing, whether good or evil. What I believe is happening and what took place in this teaching is, as Solomon sat down as an older man and he was writing this, he said, I have something I want to teach you. And what he does is he begins to walk through and chronicle at a high level his life's approach. And then his take now on looking back on his approach to life. And then he gets to the very end, and what he is saying in essence is this: there is one thing that I want for all of you to take away from this teaching, and that is, and he points everybody to God. You see, what I believe Solomon is doing here is he's closing out this teaching by saying, don't live your life the way I lived my life. Don't walk in my footsteps. Don't live your life chasing after the wind. Don't do that. Because in the end, you will end up like me with regret. As an old, cynical, burned out person, this is where you'll end up, and looking back saying, I wasted my life. Don't do what I did. Instead, put your eyes on God. When you look at what Solomon has recorded for us in Ecclesiastes, what he is describing is what a life that is lived for yourself looks like. He was really good at living for himself, wasn't he? He took all of his ability from an intellectual standpoint, his power and his wealth, and he maximized it to the fullest, trying his best to grab onto things that he could hold on to gain from this life. And I'm telling you, if a trillionaire that was a king, who was the wisest man to ever live, could not hold on to things, all of us peasants, we have no shot, do we? And that's what Solomon wanted for all the, if you will, peasants of his day and all of us today to know, is that I couldn't do it. And I'm telling you, you don't want to end up where I'm at. And so he pointed everyone to God. As I think about this, I'm reminded of something that Jesus said during his life. It's one of the core teachings of Jesus, one of the most powerful teachings of Jesus that Luke records for us in Luke chapter 9. In verse 23, he writes this. Jesus said this: if anyone wants to follow after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life because of me will save it. For what does it benefit someone if he gains the whole world and yet loses or forfeits himself? So some of you know this, some of you don't, but I grew up in the home of a preacher, okay? My dad was a pastor. Never thought I'd be one. Never wanted to be one. Just being real about it, okay? It's so funny how God works in life, isn't it? But so I heard sermons all the time at church and at home, which I feel bad about even for my kids today because they probably get a lot of sermons. But I remember hearing this statement about that Jesus made taught a lot. And just being real with you, the way that I heard it oftentimes when he said, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me, is that it seemed to me that Jesus was saying, if you want to follow me, I'm going to take all your fun away. Have any of you ever felt that way? I'm going to take all your fun away. Because, let's just be real. Denying yourself and this metaphor of carrying a cross doesn't sound like a lot of fun. And so I really thought that for years, that Christianity was more about rules of do this and don't do that, and that's really what it was all about. But when you take a step back and you look at what Solomon just wrote about, as he described this path of life of being a wind chaser and living for yourself that ends in futility and ends in being burned out and cynicism and all this, and then you think about what Jesus is saying, and he's saying, hey, if you want to follow after me, you're going to have to deny being a wind chaser and living for yourself and trying to pursue all these things in the world, and you are to come with me, and I'm going to lead you to chase God. That's what he was saying. Jesus, guys, did not come to take our fun away. Jesus came to set us free and to rescue us all from experiencing a life of futility for a life of fulfillment. He came to call us away from chasing the wind to chasing God with him. That's what he calls us to. And it's interesting as you read through this statement by Jesus that you hear echoes of Solomon and what he wrote in Ecclesiastes and what Jesus says. He says, hey, if you want to save your life, you're going to lose it. Meaning if you want to hold on to it and you lead it, you're going to lose it. But if you lose your life for me, or you give your life up to me, you will save it. And then he asks that question, what do you benefit? What do you gain? If you go out and you gain the whole world, but it costs you your soul, or it costs you your life. This is exactly what Solomon was saying. And so Jesus was trying to rescue people away from a life of futility, a life of burnout. What's also awesome about Jesus is that he gave some descriptions, and really he made some promises of what we can expect if we follow him, if we give our lives to him. And there are two that I want to share with you today. There are a couple of my favorite. The first one, John writes in his gospel, and this is what he had to say. Jesus said, I am the gate. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. A thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come so that they may have life and have it in abundance. Jesus, it's interesting, he referred to himself in a lot of creative ways. In this case, he said, I am the gate. That basically access to the Father, access to this relationship with your Heavenly Father and being adopted and reconciled to him is through Jesus. But what he made a promise is that if you come with me, if you follow me, you're going to live and experience a life of abundance. The abundance of experiencing God relationally, what you were created for, these blessings in your life of being a child of the God of the universe, this is what you'll experience. Another place that he shared what you could expect is one of my all-time favorites, and I speak about this at least once a year, so I might as well go ahead and talk about it again, but it's the invitation in Matthew's gospel, and this is how Jesus said it on that day. He said, come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, because I am lowly and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Another invitation where he invited people, and you could think of this as being weary and burdened. It can capture a lot of different things in life, but it can be burdened by trying to be good enough for God to love you and accept you, which is not the gospel. It's Jesus was good for us, and it's in his righteousness that we are made righteous in him. But Jesus is saying, hey, look, I'm here, and if you're weary and burdened, if you're burned out, if you're struggling with all these things in life, I want to lead you away from that. But all you have to do is come to me. And as you walk with me, I will train you on how to live this life of chasing God as a son of God, a daughter of God. And what you'll find is rest for your souls. As I think about rest for the soul, a lot of times we tend to just kind of leave that at the surface level and think, okay, well, what does rest mean? You know, we don't really go that deep. But man, when I think about rest for my soul, I think about joy. I think about freedom. I think about peace. I think about contentment, gratitude, love, right? These are the things we think about when we think about rest for the soul. And that's what Jesus is saying, is that I'm here to call you away and for you to deny yourself or deny and abandon this wind-chasing life of living for yourself, for a life where you're going to experience abundance and your soul will be placed at rest. But in order for you to experience that, you have to follow Jesus. As I think about all of this and just what God's been saying to me, there's an image that keeps coming to mind for me that I'll show you of two paths. And what I believe God has been speaking to me about just in my own life is that when we think about the way the scriptures teach about life, it can be seen as living according to one of two paths. We have to choose. You can't take both. You really have to choose. There's the path that Solomon described, the path of wind chasing, the path of living for yourself, the path that leads to a life of burnout, that is filled with burnout along the way, and you can choose that path. The other path is the path of chasing after God with Jesus. And this is the path that we're invited to join Jesus on in a relationship with him, where he's the one who teaches us and trains us and leads us to experience this abundant life, this life with your soul at rest. And so this is the choice we have to make every single day. But here, let me tell you what he's been saying to me as to why I've been struggling with cycling in and out of burnout. What I have a tendency to do is take the path of wind chasing, but splashing Jesus in it a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Where I go after what I want to go after. And I pursue what I think is going to make me happy and what I can see with my eyes and what I can calculate with my mind, that this is what's going to make Jonathan Dunn happy. And then I try to get Jesus in on it. And a lot of times I try to go, Jesus, this is what I need to do, so you need to support me in it. Y'all are laughing because you know you do it too, right? But this is the way I tend to operate. And what he's been saying to me is, John, this is why you keep cycling in and out of burnout, because people of the way, which is how the Christians were first referred to, not as Christians, but people of the way, they see Jesus as the way. There is not your way, try to splash Jesus in. No, it is his way that he is calling us away from and rescuing us from our way to experience the life we were created to experience. And so this doesn't work, what I've been doing. And so what I'm finding is that increasingly more and more, I don't want to do it my way. Because doing it my way is really not fun. It's really not. Guys, anxiety is not fun. Depression's not fun. Exhaustion's not fun. Fear's not fun. And I could go on and on and on. You guys know this. The thing about Jesus is that when he leads you, he doesn't lead you down that path. That's not your experience. Your experience with him is him rescuing you from those things. Yes, you may experience some of those things along the way because of this broken world in our lives, but he is always there to help you through that by the power of the Spirit who lives within you. This past week, I went to lunch with a guy, and we were just talking about life, and had a few meetings this week where this came up. But as we were talking about how difficult life can be, I shared something with him that is really pressing on me right now. And it's a statement that the Apostle Paul made, where he wrote, and it's a powerful statement, but it's short. He said, pray without ceasing. Has that been a statement or a verse that you've read before and you're thinking, how do you do that? Have you? I have as well. But the reason why it's been on my mind as of late is because what I'm seeing is that I really need to pray a whole heck of a lot more than what I do. And what I'm finding is that now that God has awakened me to this truth about the root cause of burnout, this path of burnout and wind chasing, is that I'm starting to second guess my gut and my beliefs on this is what I should do, instead of just going with it and believing I'm right. Going to Jesus saying, Jesus, I don't know if I'm right. I don't know. I don't want to do this if you don't want me to do this. If you're not in this, I don't want to pursue it. So will you please show me what to do? Will you direct me? And I'm finding that I'm praying a whole lot more, and it's because I've done that thing. I haven't done it like Solomon, okay? Especially with all the concubines and wives, okay? I haven't done that. Don't plan to do that. But I haven't done it the way of Jesus like I'm called to either. And I want to. And the only way I know to do that is to just keep talking to him about it and asking for his help. So this morning, I want to ask you, as you think about the two paths, you think about the path of wind chasing, you think about the path of chasing God with Jesus, which one would you say, honestly, is the one you've given your heart to? Because you give your heart to one or the other. You don't give your heart to both. There's no splitsies, okay? It's one or the other. One has your heart. Jesus either has your heart or this world has your heart. So as you think about that, honestly, where are you? Have you been playing this dumb game like I've been playing of trying to splash Jesus into it? Because if that's where you're at, you now know, as Solomon said, it's going to lead and keep you stuck in burnout. But Jesus calls you right now to abandon that, deny yourself, follow him to experience a life of abundance and a life with your soul at rest. So will you give him your heart? Will you say, forgive me? And then will you daily begin to pursue life? Not saying, I know, I've got it right, but going to Jesus saying, what do you want for me to do?